I can still remember the taste of irony, bitter and sweet all at once, as I stood by the tall glass window of my office overlooking Manhattan. The city glittered beneath me like a million tiny stars, but all I could focus on was the buzzing of my phone on the marble desk behind me. The invitation lay open in my inbox, words so formal they almost felt sterile. We would be honored if you would attend and say a few words at the gala. Funny. Just 2 years ago, these same people wouldn't even return my calls. They turned down my invitation, my plea, really, to be part of a milestone I once thought mattered. And now, I'm the guest of honor. I brushed my hand down the sleeve of my silk blouse, smoothing out a wrinkle that wasn't really there. Old habits. The kind you keep when you've fought too hard to ever show a crack. My reflection in the window caught me, composed, polished, expensive. But underneath the diamond studs and the glossy hair, the girl they once dismissed still breathed quietly, reminding me where this story began. The phone buzzed again. A text from my assistant, Daniel. Car is ready downstairs whenever you are. I exhaled, a little laugh escaping despite the tension pulling at my chest. They refused my invite once. Tonight, they'll clap for me. Tonight, every single one of them will see exactly who I became without their approval. And if I'm being honest, that's the sweetest revenge of all. It started years ago, before the skyline views, before the power suits, before anyone cared to even say my name with respect. Back then, I was just Olivia Hayes, a 21-year-old girl with shaky dreams and even shakier hands. I still remember the night I tried to gather my family in the living room of our small Virginia home. The air smelled faintly of burnt popcorn, my little brother Ethan had the TV blaring, and my father sat in his recliner, arms crossed, already impatient. Can you just listen to me for 5 minutes? I asked, clutching the folder that held my business plan. My voice cracked halfway through, and I hated how small it sounded. Mom sighed, like she was already tired of whatever I was about to say. Olivia, sweetheart, we've been through this. You're not ready. You need something stable. But I pushed forward, opening the folder, showing them the sketches, the projections, the late-night scribbles I had poured myself into. This is stable. If I can just get your support, even just come to the launch night. Dad cut me off with a sharp laugh, shaking his head. A launch? For what, Olivia? Some little hobby? You think investors will take you seriously when your own family won't. The words stung worse than any slap could have. Ethan smirked at the TV, not even looking at me, as if my humiliation was background noise. I felt my cheeks burn, tears threatening, but I swallowed them down. My fingers trembled as I closed the folder. That's when Grandma Ruth, my mother's mother, spoke. She was sitting quietly in the corner, knitting like always. Her hands paused, and she looked at me over her glasses. If the rest of them can't see it, I do. I blinked, stunned. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver locket, worn with age. She pressed it into my palm, curling my fingers around it. This belonged to my mother. Every woman in this family had to fight for herself at some point. Maybe it's your turn. Tears blurred my vision, but for the first time that night, they weren't from shame. They were from hope. My father muttered something under his breath. My mother looked away. No one agreed to come to my launch. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I held the locket so tightly it left a mark in my palm. Their rejection cut deep, but her words stitched something back together inside me. And that's when I made the decision. If my family refused to stand beside me, I'd learn to stand alone. Leaving home felt like ripping off a bandage, except the wound underneath was still raw. I packed everything into 2 suitcases, clothes, a secondhand laptop, and that silver locket from Grandma Ruth. When I boarded the bus to New York, I didn't have much more than stubbornness and a heart that refused to quit. The city was brutal. My first apartment was the size of a closet with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that hissed like it was angry at me. Some nights, I cried myself to sleep, the noise of sirens outside drowning out my sobs. But every morning I woke up, opened that laptop, and tried again. At first, no one cared about my ideas. Emails went unanswered. Meetings ended before they began. I worked shifts at a coffee shop on 34th Street just to pay rent, scrubbing floors after closing, my hands smelling of espresso and bleach. But then I met Margaret Stone. She was a sharp, seasoned entrepreneur who came into the cafe one night when I was wiping tables. She noticed the business book I had been scribbling notes in during my break. "You read that for fun?" she asked, raising a perfectly shaped eyebrow. I nodded, cheeks flushing. "I'm trying to build something. Someday." That someday became sooner than I imagined. Margaret invited me to a networking event. I almost didn't go. I didn't have the right dress, the right shoes, the right anything. But I showed up anyway, in borrowed heels that pinched my feet. That night I met my first client, a small brand willing to take a chance on me when no one else would. I stayed up 3 nights in a row perfecting their project. When they paid me just a few $100s, it felt like the universe had finally whispered back, "Keep going." From there, it was a slow climb. More clients, more late nights, rejections that nearly crushed me, but tiny wins that rebuilt me. I taught myself skills no one thought I could learn: marketing strategies, design software, negotiation tactics. I learned to walk into rooms where no one expected me and leave with contracts in hand. Still, I kept it quiet. My family back in Virginia thought I was just getting by. I let them think that. My social media was modest, my updates vague. I didn't want their doubt contaminating my progress. There was one night, though, I'll never forget. I had just closed my first 6-figure deal. Alone in my apartment, I opened a cheap bottle of champagne and toasted to no one but myself. I laughed and cried all at once, holding that silver locket against my chest. Every stumble, every night I wanted to quit, every slammed door, it had all led here. But I still wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. Because I knew, deep down, that the real moment of truth would come when they finally saw me, the woman I had become, standing tall in the spotlight they once tried to dim. And when that day came, I wouldn't have to beg for their presence. They'd be the ones begging for mine. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of winter chill that makes even New York sidewalks feel sharp under your heels. My driver pulled up to the glittering hotel entrance, cameras flashing as guests in gowns and tuxedos streamed inside. I paused before stepping out, adjusting the clasp on my diamond bracelet. My reflection in the car window stared back at me. Olivia Hayes, founder and CEO of Hayes Collective. A name that finally meant something. Inside, chandeliers rained light over the grand ballroom. Gold accents shimmered on every table, the champagne fountains bubbling like liquid luxury. The air buzzed with conversation, laughter, the kind of energy that once belonged to a world I could only watch from afar. And then, I saw them. My parents, my brother, even a couple of cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. They looked almost small against the grandeur of it all, clustered together near the back of the room, whispering as their eyes darted around nervously. They hadn't seen me yet. Funny, I thought. When I invited them years ago, they didn't show. Now, they had no choice but to sit through an entire evening with me at the center of it. My assistant, Daniel, leaned in close. "They've seated your family near the front, per your request." "Perfect," I whispered, smoothing down the silk of my gown. The program began. Introductions, applause, polite speeches. I listened with half an ear, my heart pounding harder with each passing minute. Finally, the host's voice rang out. "And now, please welcome our guest of honor, Olivia Hayes." The room erupted in applause. I rose slowly, deliberately, letting every second stretch. As I walked to the stage, I caught my mother's eyes. She looked stunned, like she'd seen a ghost. My father shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. Ethan's smirk was gone. I reached the podium, the spotlight hot on my skin, and smiled. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady, confident. "It feels surreal to stand here tonight. Some of you know my story. Most don't. But I'll tell you this. Not long ago, I was the girl no one believed in. The one whose ideas were dismissed, whose invitations went unanswered. I let my gaze sweep the crowd, pausing, just long enough, on the faces of my family. They said I wasn't ready, that I wasn't enough. But tonight, I stand here as the founder of a company that employs hundreds, collaborates with global brands, and generates revenue in the millions. Tonight, I am not the girl they doubted. I am the woman they cannot ignore. Gasps rippled through the room. I saw my father's eyes widen, my mother's lips part in disbelief. Ethan looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. And the sweetest part? I continued, a touch of irony softening my tone. When I first tried to celebrate my beginnings, my own invitation was refused. But life has a sense of humor, because tonight, I am the guest of honor. Applause thundered through the ballroom, echoing off marble walls. The sound wrapped around me like a shield, louder, stronger than any voice of doubt I'd ever heard. I stepped down from the stage and returned to my table, the crowd still clapping. My family sat frozen, like statues carved from guilt and shame. When I reached them, I leaned down slightly, keeping my smile polite. Surprised? I asked softly. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her glass of water. Olivia, we had no idea. That's right, I said, my voice gentle but unyielding. Because I stopped asking for your approval a long time ago. The silence that followed was louder than any applause. The dinner carried on with chatter and laughter all around us, but at my table, the silence was suffocating. My family sat stiff, eyes darting anywhere but at me. I took a slow sip of champagne, letting them stew in the discomfort. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Olivia, you've really made something of yourself. It was meant as a compliment, but it sounded more like an admission. Yes, I said simply, folding my napkin across my lap. I have. My mother leaned forward, her voice soft, almost pleading. We didn't realize how serious you were back then. We wanted what was best for you. I set my glass down carefully, the crystal ringing against the table. What you thought was best for me was silence. Dismissal. Do you know how it feels to beg your own family to show up for you and be met with laughter? Her eyes dropped. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I took a breath. My tone softened, but it didn't lose its edge. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here because for the first time in my life, I have the power to choose how this story ends. They looked at me then, really looked. And I continued. If you want a place in my life moving forward, it comes with conditions. My father's brow furrowed. Conditions? Yes, I said firmly. For you, Dad, it's time to let go of the bitterness. Stop crushing every dream that doesn't look like yours. If you want to know me now, you'll have to learn how to believe in someone other than yourself. He swallowed hard, eyes flickering with shame. I turned to my mother. For you, it's time to use your voice. Stop standing in the shadows of other people's decisions. You stayed quiet when I needed you most. If you want to be in my world now, silence isn't an option anymore. Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded faintly. Then I faced Ethan. And you, little brother. You mocked me once. You treated my ambition like a joke. If you want my respect, you'll earn it by finding your own path, not tearing mine down. He shifted again, no smirk this time. Just a boy realizing his sister had grown into someone he could no longer ignore. I leaned back, letting the weight of my words settle over them. These aren't punishments. They're choices. Because I won't allow old patterns to creep back into my life. I built this without you, and I can continue without you. But if you want in, it's on my terms now. No one spoke for a long moment. The clinking of silverware and hum of the gala around us felt like another world entirely. Finally, my mother whispered, "We'll try. We'll do better." I studied her face, searching for sincerity. And for the first time, I saw it there. I picked up the locket hanging around my neck and held it lightly. "Good," I said. Because I didn't come this far to live in the past. Either you rise with me, or you watch me from the crowd. Their silence told me they understood. The night wound down in a blur of music, laughter, and clinking glasses. Guests danced under chandeliers, deals were made in hushed corners, and my name was spoken with admiration I once only dreamed of. But at my table, the energy was different, quiet, tentative, almost fragile. My family didn't leave early. That surprised me. They stayed, not out of obligation, but out of something new, something that looked almost like humility. I caught my father watching me as I greeted colleagues, his stern face softening with something unspoken. My mother clutched her clutch bag tightly, as if holding herself together, but every so often she glanced at me with pride shining through the guilt. And Ethan, he didn't say much. But when he hugged me goodbye, it wasn't the quick, careless tap I remembered from childhood. It was real, solid. Later, when the ballroom finally emptied and I was alone again, I walked to the edge of the stage. The spotlight had been switched off, but I stood in it anyway, staring out at the rows of empty chairs. My heels echoed softly against the polished wood. I reached for the locket resting against my collarbone. Opening it, I traced the tiny portrait of my great-grandmother inside, the one Grandma Ruth had told me about. Every woman in this family had to fight for herself, she'd said. Tonight, I finally understood what that meant. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was changing what it meant to be a Hayes woman. For years, I carried the wound of rejection, the ache of not being enough in the eyes of the people I loved most. But tonight, I stood in the same room as them, not as the girl begging for approval, but as the woman who created her own worth. And for the first time, I didn't need their applause. I already had mine. As I closed the locket and slipped it back beneath the silk of my gown, a smile curved my lips. The past would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined me. The lights dimmed further, and the quiet of the empty hall wrapped around me like peace. My voice echoed only in my own mind, steady and certain. They refused my invite once. But life has a way of rewriting stories. Tonight, I'm not just in the room. I'm the guest of honor.